In the world of EdTech, we're often sold on the magic. We see the flashy UI and the promises of AI-driven results. But as decision makers, we need to ask the one question that matters. Does this actually help students learn?
We aren't just buying software, we're investing student time and public funds. Today, we're moving beyond the surface. We brought together a panel of experts to give you the ultimate crash course in evidence-based decision-making.
In the 2026 EdTech Evidence Report by Instructure and Innovate EDU, we found that verified evidence for the most used tools in classrooms is still growing, and noticed a difference between EdTech tools, which are purpose-built for education, and consumer tech tools, which tend to be passive and engagement-driven.
This report looks at 5 EdTech Quality Indicators, which include evidence as one of the indicators, safety, data privacy, evidence-based, ESSA alignment, inclusivity, how accessible is it, usability, teacher friendliness, interoperability, does it securely talk to other tech and systems?
The report found that 40% of purpose-built EdTech tools have ESSA evidence, but only 2% of general consumer tools do. We have to demand these indicators during procurement.
So here's your takeaway. The 2026 EdTech Evidence Report gives us a clear framework, 5 indicators to evaluate any tool before you buy: safety, evidence, inclusivity, usability, and interoperability. And the data is stark. Purpose-built EdTech tools have evidence at 20 times the rate of consumer tools. If a vendor can't speak to all 5 quality indicators, that's a flag worth taking seriously.
When we talk about evidence in the US K-12 context, we're usually talking about ESSA Tiers from the Every Student Succeeds Act. Think of these as a ladder of certainty. What does ESSA Tier actually mean? It's a grading system for research design quality. It answers the question, how confident are we that this tool led to better learning outcomes?
At the base, Tier 4 is a theory of how the app is designed to work and why it should produce results. At this stage, there is no study done on the app itself. Tier 3, or promising, means there's a correlational study. Correlational means that 2 things happened at the same moment in time, like kids spending more time using an app and their scores going up. We can't prove that the app caused it. Maybe they just had a great teacher that year.
For high-stakes decisions, we want top-tier ESSA studies. Both Tier 1 and Tier 2 studies compare students or teachers who use a tool with those who didn't use it. In Tier 2, teachers might volunteer or leaders might choose which schools use it. Most often, you'll see them called quasi-experimental design studies. Technically speaking, this is just a fancy way of saying we compare students who use the tool with those who didn't, not using random assignment. Researchers use statistical methods to make the comparison as fair as possible. ESSA Tier 1 is even stricter, as it's a randomized controlled trial, meaning that students are randomly chosen to either receive the tool or not receive it. Generally, RCTs are the gold standard for research, from medicine to education, and often take time and resources to complete.
One last thing to add here. What assessment did the study use? Was it a state test, or a nationally normed computer adaptive assessment, or the vendor's own test, or something created for the study? Here's where you should use your judgment as an educator to see if the assessment they used aligns with what you use.
ESSA tiers tell you how confident we can be that a tool actually caused better outcomes. Tier 4 is a theory. Tier 3 shows correlation. Tiers 1 and 2 compare students who used the tool with students who didn't. And one more thing to carry forward, always make sure the study matches your context. The evidence may not travel.
Technically speaking, ESSA Tiers 1 through 3 require at least one statistically positive finding on a relevant outcome. If a study says a result is statistically significant, it means it's unlikely to be due to chance. Statistical significance only tells you the result isn't random. It doesn't tell you if the result is important. For that, you need the effect size, the magnitude of the impact.
To understand whether the finding matters, you really need to look at the size of the effect. These are measured in fractions of a standard deviation. So 1 standard deviation above the 50th percentile would be the 84th percentile. All you really need to keep in mind are 2 things: what 2 groups are being compared, and that the bigger the number is, the larger the difference between the 2 groups.
I've conducted dozens of these studies and reviewed hundreds more, and you rarely see an effect size above 0.40 for an overall reading or overall math measure in a large, rigorous study. So keep in mind that many aspects of a study influence effect sizes beyond the student outcomes.
Statistical significance, that's a tongue twister, tells you a result probably isn't random. Effect size tells you whether it matters. Ask for the effect size. Ask what 2 groups are being compared, and keep expectations grounded. Effect sizes above 0.40 on broad reading or math measures are rare, even in strong studies. A modest effect size in a well-designed study is often more meaningful than a flashy number with no context.
At Stanford's Scale Initiative, our 2026 review analyzed over 800 papers relevant to AI and K-12. It might sound like a lot, but not all evidence is created equal. We found only 20 high-quality causal studies aligned with ESSA Tier 1 or Tier 2 evidence.
Strong evidence means the tool worked in a real classroom somewhere. Your job is to figure out whether the conditions in that study match your reality.
In literacy, we saw an ESSA Tier 1 validated tool close gaps for English language learners because the small group intervention had multiple foundational skills.
In math, consistency is key. One district picked an ESSA Tier 2 validated tool because it proved it helped students achieve higher outcomes across diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. When we look at evidence-based decision-making under ESSA, we have to look past the badge number and focus on the content. An ESSA Tier 1 strong evidence rating is incredibly valuable, but it is not a silver bullet. If a tool achieved ESSA Tier 1 status in a district that looks nothing like ours, that evidence doesn't automatically transfer. As district leaders, adopting the ESSA Tier 2 tool that has shown moderate success in an environment exactly like yours, with your student demographics, your technical infrastructure, and your instructional model, is often more valuable than adopting a generic Tier 1 tool. Evidence without context is just noise. We need to evaluate research through the lens of our own reality to ensure we are getting a true return on instruction.
Don't forget dosage. Technically speaking, dosage is the prescription for using the tool. What did the study's implementation look like, and how does it compare to yours? How many minutes per week did students use the tool? And were there dedicated staff supporting it? Was it used during whole class lessons or in small groups? If students in the study use the tool for 60 minutes a week, but your schedule only allows for 15 minutes of independent practice, you're not buying what was tested. Ask vendors to be transparent about the conditions that their evidence depends on. At ED, our trial data showed that students who met a minimum weekly practice threshold had meaningfully larger gains than the overall average. That's because the overall number includes every student assigned to use the tool, even those who barely used it. We now share the threshold with every school that we work with, so leaders can plan their timetables around what the evidence says is needed. Whether you're evaluating a product, ask the vendor, what's the minimum dosage and how do you know?
Strong evidence means a tool worked somewhere. Your job is to figure out whether it worked here. A Tier 1 study from a district that looks nothing like yours may be less useful than a Tier 2 study from one that does. And don't overlook dosage. Ask vendors to tell you the minimum conditions their evidence depends on. We've created a simple prioritization rubric for your next cabinet meeting.
Don't just ask, what does it do? Ask, does it meet the 5 quality indicators? What is its ESSA tier? And what was the effect size in a district like ours?
It's really important to look beyond company-produced white papers for independent and/or third-party validated research.
Don't rely on self-reported vendor white papers. Instead, look to trusted, low-cost, nonprofit clearinghouses that act as independent peer reviewers. For example, Evidence for ESSA offers free verification of rigorous tier alignment. The ISTE EdTech Index and EduEvidence provide accessible entry points to evaluate research and ESSA evidence. And Digital Promise certifies that a tool's foundation is genuinely rooted in the learning sciences.
If a tool is not listed on one of these major clearinghouses, don't try to decode the dense psychometric information alone. Send a copy of the vendor study to a trusted peer or research partner who has vetted these reports before. Ask them to try to verify 3 things. Did the study use a true comparison group? Was the sample size large enough and representative enough? And do the data points in the appendix actually match the claims that the marketing brochure is indicating?
Focus on the why before the buy.
Here's how to put it all together. Use the 5 quality indicators as your checklist. Look for that ESSA tier, an effect size in a context that resembles your own. Seek out independent, third-party research over vendor white papers. And when in doubt, run a small pilot before committing. The matrix we're leaving you with today, it's a starting point, not a substitute for your own judgment as an educator. Evidence without context is just noise. You're the one who knows your community, your students, your learners.